Part 64. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 631. Rong Yu stood with his hands behind his back, standing motionless in the dark, obviously not planning to step forward. Xian Yuanyao and Xiejin also did not move, but they knew in their hearts that these gentry children were also unlucky. They were caught by their masters, and they might not get any good results tonight. Although Chu Hongii is strict in running the army, she will inevitably have to take action later, but she only has the power to run the army. If the trouble really comes to the point of asking for military registration, she will need to write a statement stating the reasons, and the official department will submit the statement to the imperial court. And only after the approval of His Majesty or the regent can the decision be made. If there is a powerful minister in the Ministry of Personnel who suppresses this matter, then you need to continue to wait. Even if Chu Hongii can see Her Majesty the Queen every day, some things still need to abide by the rules and follow the process step by step. That's why these gentry children have no fear, because there is a saying that the law does not blame everyone. The children of the noble family are making trouble collectively. If they want to sign up for the military, there will be a lot of them. Although the children of the noble family are not as powerful as the powerful families, they also represent the entire imperial family. Their deep-rooted sense of superiority always keeps them in front of the guards of the Hanman. With a condescending attitude, he also took it for granted that as long as all the gentry children unite, even Chu Hongii can't do anything to them. Because no one would be willing to go against the entire noble clan. Their thoughts were innocent and beautiful, but it was a pity that they met Chu Hongii, who didn't know how to beat around the bush. She only recognized the rules but not the background. They were destined to suffer tonight. After Chu Hongii gave the order, the Hanman guards who participated in the fight had already started running around the school grounds en masse. The gentry children were still provoking, but Chu Hongii didn't say anything, only said coldly, fighting fiercely, "You have no knowledge and no skills, disobey the orders, be rebellious and unruly, and have no right to stay in the forbidden army, Qin Fang. My subordinate is here. Write down all the names of these people who disobey orders. Starting tomorrow, they will no longer have to come to training, and they will no longer have to be on duty in the palace. Chu Hongii, you are not qualified to deal with it like this." Chu Hongii gave the speaker a cold look. "This general will report to the Ministry of Civil Affairs and request Your Majesty's decision." "Your Majesty will not agree to Your Majesty will definitely agree." Chu Hongii interrupted the other party's words clearly and coldly. "No one is allowed to slack off and cause trouble in the Imperial Guards. No one who is uneducated or unskilled will be allowed. No one will be allowed. Those who do not obey the laws and military disciplines will be reported to Your Majesty personally tomorrow morning, and those who are dishonest will be expelled from the Forbidden Army." The harsh words seemed to be wrapped in a cold air, causing the listeners to change their expressions. They were so shocked that they dared not speak for a while. The man standing diagonally opposite her had a cold and arrogant look on his face. General Chu used to be in charge of the military, but now he is in charge of the Imperial Army. He must be very skilled. Chu Hongii seemed to understand what he meant. "Want to compete? I really want to ask for advice," the cold and proud man said. "If General Chu can win today, then all the sons of the noble family will be willing to obey the general's orders in the future. If he behaves out of line tonight, he should also listen to the general's punishment. If General Chu loses now, please turn a blind eye to what the nobles do from now on. If it's not your business, don't worry about it so much." Chu Hongii's expression was indifferent. "How do you want to compare? A warrior is naturally better at riding and shooting." "Who is this person?" Xian Yuanyao turned to look at Xiejin. Although his tone is arrogant, he has a good mind and knows how to find a way to get off. He heard that Chu Hongii was serious. If he wrote down the list of everyone and submitted it to the officials, things would not end in a big fuss. Besides, regardless of whether they accepted it or not, there was no denying that Chu Hongii was now the celebrities in front of His Majesty. If things really get out of hand, they will definitely be the unlucky ones. Xiejin said, "This person is Mrs. Mo's nephew Xiao Qi, and he and Mo Suanwu are cousins." Mo family relatives. Xianyu Enyao thought of the Mo family, which had been relatively quiet recently, and turned to look at Rong Yu. "Your Majesty, you are not willing to use people from the Mo family." From what he knew, the Mo family didn't seem to have done anything particularly extraordinary so far. The Mo family had never secretly objected to the Empress coming to Zhou dynasty from Dongling, and they didn't seem to have any particularly close contacts with the Wei Palace. The only one who left a deep impression was Mo Suanwu, the legitimate son of the Mo family, was once defeated by Chu Hongii. The Mo family's presence has not been strong for more than a year, and the children of the Mo family have not been in the limelight outside. They seem to have fallen silent for a moment. Rong Yu said nothing, his eyes fell on the school field. Xiao Qi got on the horse and rode to the other end with Chu Hong. There were more than a dozen targets on the other end. Chu Hong and Xiao Qi both understood the rules of the competition, so there was no need to say anything more. 10 arrows for each person. Chu Hongii held the bow and raised her hand to knock an arrow. "As long as one of your arrows hits the target, I will lose today's competition." General Chu's tone is too loud. Xiao Qi reined up his horse and stopped 150 steps away from the target, cocked the arrow, aimed at the bullseye 100 steps away, and shot the arrow neatly. Whoosh! The arrow pierced the air and left the string. Everyone held their breath and couldn't help but become quiet. Chu Hongii calmly drew her bow and shot out. One arrow went straight after the arrow in front of her. Then there was a clang sound. The arrow that was aimed at the bullseye was deflected by the arrow that was chasing after her. 2 arrows shot towards the target. Both arrows fell to the ground. Xiao Qi took out the arrow from his quiver and shot it again. Chu Hongyi's face was calm, and she and Xiao Qi made the same move one after another, still coming from behind, and shot down his arrow neatly. Xiao Qi continued to shoot, holding the bow firmly in his palm. His eyes were like lightning, and the arrows shot out quickly. Whoosh! However, it was no surprise that Chu Hongii was one step behind him every time, but the arrow quickly caught up with him, making his wish to shoot the target in vain. 10 times in a row, every time. The people around him were silent and watched intently. After shooting 10 arrows, Xiao Qi was completely defeated. This kind of competition is actually not that difficult. After all, the archery target is dead and fixed there. Anyone who has truly practiced archery should be able to hit the target. Compared with Xianyu Enyao's previous difficulty in shooting eagles, this challenge is much simpler. It's just that every arrow of Xiao Qi was intercepted by Chu Hongii and failed again and again. This scene made Xianyu Enyao couldn't help but think of the feeling of being crushed by Rong Yu before. He was so angry that he wanted to pierce the opponent's vitals with the arrow. He understands the mood very well. So Xiao Kai's face was extremely ugly at this time. "Do you want to continue the competition?" Chu Hongii held the bow, pulled out 2 arrows from her quiver, strung the bow, and aimed at the red bullseye in front of her. Whoosh! The 2 arrows broke through the wind at the same time, and instantly pierced the bullseye in front of them. After shaking twice, they stayed on the target. "If you're not good at level shooting, how can you talk about riding shooting?" Chu Hongii looked at Xiao Qi coldly and asked again, "Do you want to continue?" Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbspeed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 632. Xiao Kai's face flushed, and he knelt on one knee. "I am convinced, no need to compete again. In that case, all the sons of the noble families will run 200 laps around the parade ground. Xiao Kai's face changed slightly. 200 laps. General Chu, don't go too far. It was only 100 laps just now, why did it become 200 in a blink of an eye? Some sons of the noble families shouted dissatisfiedly. You are relying on winning the competition to impose penalties arbitrarily. How can this be justified? That's right. The guards of the poor family ran 100 laps, and we ran 200. General Chu's punishment is really unfair. We don't accept it. Don't accept it. Chu Hong'ai galloped on his horse, picked up a silver spear from a row of soldiers standing next to the parade ground, turned over and dismounted, and looked around the field coldly. If you don't accept it, go pick your own weapons. The sons of the noble families didn't hesitate for a moment, turned around to get weapons. Those with swords took swords, those with guns took guns, and swarmed towards Chu Hong'ai, and in an instant, the swords and shadows came together, covering Chu Hong'ai head on. Chu Hong'ai waved the silver spear in her hand, and with a backhand shot, she swept away several people who were coming towards her. Two long spears attacked from the side at the same time. Chu Hong'ai bent her body backwards and flexibly avoided them. She waved the long spear like a dragon out of the sea. Wherever the spear flower passed, someone would fall down in embarrassment. The surrounding onlookers were all silent. On the huge training ground, a woman in a black robe was seen flying a silver spear across the sky, invincible, almost like a sharp knife cutting tofu. Wherever the long spear went, people and horses fell down, and there was a wailing sound in a moment. In less than a cup of tea, all the people who took action fell to the ground and couldn't get up. Everyone's face was pale and embarrassed. Xian Yuanyao was not surprised at all. Chu Hong'ai came from the military camp and had sharp skills. These nobles' fancy moves could not be compared. Moreover, among the imperial guards, the children of the nobles had the weakest skills. They couldn't even be considered fancy moves. If they dared to provoke, they would only be sandbags. Rong Yu's brows were gloomy and calm, and he finally walked towards the training ground. Who else is dissatisfied? Chu Hong'ai stood with a silver spear, her face always indifferent. If you can still breathe, get up and run immediately. The regent is here. Just at this moment, Xian Yuanyao shouted coldly, and everyone on the training ground suddenly changed their faces and turned their heads to look. Under the lights, the man with a noble and cold face was like a god descending from the sky, walking slowly, with a solemn pressure between his eyebrows, which made people palpitate and tremble. The next moment, bang bang bang. Greetings to the regent. The sound of knees hitting the ground came one after another, with obvious panic. Everyone knelt on the ground, with their foreheads close to the ground. If there was a pit in front of them, they would definitely want to bury their heads in the pit and never come out again. The guards of the poor family who were being punished to run also stopped, looked at each other for a while, and knelt on the spot. Chu Hong'ai knelt on one knee. I pay my respects to the regent. General Chu, stand up. Rong Yu walked onto the parade ground, his cold and oppressive eyes slowly swept around, making people's backs cold. Are the children of the nobles superior to others? Can they live in the imperial army, get a salary, provoke their superiors, and cause trouble? The children of the nobles, led by Xiao Qi, turned pale and fell to the ground in fear, not daring to speak. You were not very talkative just now, why are you all mute now? Xiao Qi was terrified and looked down at the ground. I know I am wrong and I am willing to accept the punishment. Willing to accept the punishment, Rong Yu's eyes fell on his face. I seem to have heard you all shouting that you are not convinced. Xiao Qi hurriedly apologized. I know I am wrong, please punish me, regent. The faces of the imperial guards changed drastically, and they all kowtowed. I know I am wrong, I dare not disobey. I am convinced by General Chu. I deserve to die, please forgive me, regent. Although the guards from the poor families kneeling on the side were also uneasy, they were very happy at this time. It was rare to see these noble children who were usually arrogant and fearful, which was really refreshing. Rong Yu did not intend to say much, and said indifferently, Xian Yuan Yao, what should be done if there is provocation and chaos in the army? Xian Yuan Yao lowered his eyes and replied, at the lightest, 30 to 50 military sticks, and at the worst, caning to death. When the voice fell, the imperial guards all changed color, and the faces of dozens of people who caused trouble turned pale and began to tremble unconsciously. How should the lower be dealt with? Depending on the severity of the case, a fine of 30 to 100 military sticks. How should the fight and trouble be dealt with? At the lightest, 30 sticks, and at the worst, 50 to 100. The military camp has always had strict military discipline, which is much stricter than the requirements for laws and orders in any other place. Those who violate military discipline must be severely punished, so Xian Yuan Yao always reported truthfully, without deliberately exaggerating and scaring. It's just that the discipline in the military camp is usually not applicable to the imperial guards, because the imperial guards do not go to the battlefield, have never really experienced the experience of killing on the battlefield, and have always been lax in military discipline. In addition, the sense of superiority of being born in the gentry makes them never have the so-called military discipline in their cognition. At this time, they were so frightened by Xian Yuan Yao's reply that they turned pale and wanted to slap themselves a few times. How many people participated in the fight tonight? Chu Hong'ai said, there are two factions, 40 children from noble families and 56 children from poor families. Rong Yu looked at her and said, group fight. The 8 people who took the initiative to stir up trouble were Gu Ming, Fang Kai, Cai Chang, and other sons of the noble families. They bullied Zhang Rui from the poor family. Because Zhang Rui performed well in the army, I promoted him to the captain of the 8th Battalion of the Imperial Army yesterday. The nobles were dissatisfied, so the incident happened today. Chu Hong'ai said, 8 people from the noble families are the main culprits, and the others are accomplices. Zhang Rui from the poor family took action, and the sons of the poor families in the battalion took the initiative to help, but they all relied on their large numbers to suppress the opponent's momentum and did not use excessive force, so they are considered accomplices. Rong Yu understood, what percentage of the imperial army are from the nobles? There are more than 200 nobles. Rong Yu turned his head, his eyes solemn. Chen looked around at the children of the nobles. All those who participated in the fight tonight will be punished according to General Chu's method. The poor will run 100 laps and the nobles will run 200 laps. In addition, all those who offended and did not obey General Chu's discipline will be punished with 30 strokes of the cane, removed from the military, and demoted to commoners. After speaking, he said coldly, execute now. Regent, Xiao Kai's face changed, and he knelt forward, I know my mistakes and am willing to be punished by the military stick. I beg the regent to give me another chance. Chance, Rong Yu glanced at him, there will be no useless people in the army. Xiao Kai's expression was pale and he could no longer speak. Regent Chu Hong'ai lowered his eyebrows and said, Xiao Qi did not participate in the fight. He just stood on the team of the nobles, but he did not provoke or offend me. Xiao Qi raised his head and looked at Chu Hong'ai in disbelief, with gratitude and shame in his eyes. In this case, Xiao Qi will remain in the military. Rong Yu said in a stern voice, the rest of the nobles should take this as a warning. If there are any who disobey discipline again, they will be removed from the military and their punishment will be doubled, taking today as a lesson. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 633. Xiao Qi thanked him, while the others' faces turned pale green. Since the children of the noble clan are dissatisfied with the Han clan, from now on the noble clan and the Han clan will be trained separately. Rong Yu's eyes fell on Xiao Qi. The remaining members of the noble clan will form a separate camp, with Xiao Qi as the Kinhu. I will give you 3 months. In the duel with Zhang Rui's 8th Battalion after March, if the nobles lose, there will not be a single nobleman left in the Forbidden Army. Xiao Qi had just calmed down when he heard these words, and his expression suddenly changed. 3 months. The children of the poor family were all sent to the palace for training when they were teenagers or even younger. They were strong, agile, and flexible. How could the pampered children of the noble family defeat the guards of the poor family in 3 months? This is simply impossible to do. Xiejin raised his eyebrows. Does His Majesty want the imperial guards to be left with only poor families and no worms like the nobles? Of course, if within 3 months the children of the noble clan can really work hard, overcome their previous lazy and sloppy ways, face up to military discipline and order, and be able to endure the hardships of training, then even if they cannot defeat the Hanman guards after 3 months, the Lord should be able to give them a chance. Next, it depends on whether these noblemen can seize this opportunity. Xiejin's eyes turned slightly. The noble boy who did not participate in the fight tonight but suffered a disaster for nothing tonight had a pale face and looked like he was hopeless. He was really pitiful. It's just that the Imperial Guard has had its problems for a long time, and it will take time to eradicate all these problems. After being delayed by the Imperial Army, Rong Yu was not in the mood to teach Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao anymore. Instead, he was worried about Nan 11 and worried that Nan 11 would be waiting for him if he returned late. After dealing with those who should be dealt with, before leaving, he said in a cold tone, "In the future, if anyone in the Forbidden Army disobeys General Chu's discipline, he will be punished with the following crimes. The Imperial staff starts at 50, who thinks that life will be comfortable? Yes, just try." No one dared to say anything. The guards of the poor family have been trained for a long time, and they have learned the rules of obedience as soon as they enter the palace. In addition, they are not from a good background, are soft-spoken, and do not dare to offend the powerful, so no one will take the initiative to cause trouble, let alone provoke their superiors. Most of the troublemakers are young and energetic playboys from the Valve clan. People who can get in through connections can't be expected to be upright. It's their standard to be uneducated and unskilled. Among them, there are many people who bully the weak and fear the strong. After tonight's heavy punishment, enough for these people to be timid for a few days and not dare to cause trouble again. Until Rong Yu left for a long time, the school grounds were still silent and everyone felt in danger. "Everyone obeys your orders," Chu Hong'ai shouted coldly. "Those who will participate in the fight tonight are 100 from humble families and 200 from nobles. Start running now." No one dared to resist anymore. The people kneeling on the ground stood up tremblingly and started running circles around the school field. As for whether they can persist for 200 laps, that will happen after running. Regardless of whether they can finish the run or not, there are still 30 military sticks waiting for them to participate in the provocation. Tonight is destined to be a difficult night. After dealing with all this mess, Chu Hong'ai will probably not be able to go back until dawn. It has become a common practice in the Forbidden Army that the children of the noble clan are arrogant, domineering and lazy. Xiejin fell half a step behind, walking beside Rong Yu. "After the Lord's rectification tonight, I am afraid there will be no one in this year. If you dare to go through the back door, someone will come in." Xian Yuanyao frowned. There is no room for these incompetent worms in the army. If it happened during war, they would not have enough heads to chop off. The Forbidden Army is different from the soldiers on the battlefield. Xiejin glanced at him. The duty of the soldiers in the military camp is to protect their families and the country. When leading troops in war, they may lose their lives at any time, so the training is extremely hard. The harder it is, the harder it is. It can ensure that the loss of human life is less in critical moments. The Forbidden Army is relatively relaxed. They patrol and stand guard in the palace every day, and they get more salary. When they wear the uniforms of the Forbidden Army, everyone feels superior, and they don't have to suffer on the battlefield. So the noble clan members all squeezed their heads to get in. Children who love to study can pass the scientific examination and become officials. The best way out for nobles who don't like to study is to take a shortcut and sneak into the imperial army to serve as a duty. After all, it's still a moth. Xian Yao snorted coldly. If you want to enjoy great benefits without putting in a little effort, how can it be fair to those children from poor families? It's okay if you don't have any ability, but if you still dare to bully a poor family just because you are a noble family, aren't you asking for your own death? Xiejin wanted to say that one's background has already determined that there can be no equality between nobles and poor families. This is a fact. Moreover, successive emperors have always been very tolerant and partial to the nobles. For two people with the same ability, if one is from a poor family and the other is from a noble family, then the noble family must have more advantages. Many promotion opportunities. However, Xian Yuanyao was upright and couldn't get the sand out of his eyes. Xiejin didn't want to make him unhappy by saying this, and there was no point in arguing. Rong Yu said calmly, "How many young people from poor families are still training now?" "More than 800 people," Xiejin said. 200 of them have met the recruitment standards and can be arranged this year, which can just fill the gap of the 200 nobles. Rong Yu frowned. "Noblesmen cannot be brought up well. Don't let this kind of backdoor thing happen again in the future." Xiejin was silent. This is actually not his business, even if he agrees. "Starting tomorrow, you will take over the Ministry of Justice," Rong Yu said. "First check how many cases of favoritism and malpractice there are in the Ministry of Personnel. Investigate each one by one, and then we can rectify the Ministry of Justice first." Xiejin was surprised. "I will take over the Ministry of Justice. Is this rising too fast?" He is now a 5th-rank counselor, and has become the head of the Ministry of Justice. The ministers in the court may not accept it, especially after the position of the Minister of Justice was vacant. The left and right assistant ministers of the Ministry of Justice were eyeing that position. Suddenly, an airborne person came to take over the Ministry of Justice, and it was Xiejin, who had no qualifications. Just think about it and you can know how annoyed they are. "No confidence," Rong Yu glanced at him, "or do you have any concerns?" Xiejin was slightly shocked, and he dared not think that the sentence was simply considerate and concerned, and hurriedly shook his head. "I will not let my master down." Xian Yuanyao curled his lips, happy for him, and felt that such a well-behaved Xiejin was really rare. The children of poor families can endure hardships. We should train them well and select more talents for future use. Rong Yu frowned. Those who perform particularly well can be selected to form a separate camp and trained according to the standards of the Golden Armor Guard. Xiejin nodded. "The Lord is wise." Rong Yu did not comment on his flattery and asked calmly, "Who do you think is suitable to be the leader of the Golden Armor Guard?" "This." Xiejin thought for a while and said, "You can appoint the best. Since we want to build the Golden Armor Guard for poor families, then choose the most outstanding person from the poor family to be in charge. With a similar background, the people below will have more sense of identity and will not have class confrontation and contradictions between superiors and subordinates. There is another greater benefit to doing this. The opportunity to become a general is a great incentive for children of poor families. It can give them greater motivation to devote their loyalty and serve the court, so that one day they can change their status through their own efforts, protect their parents, wives, and children, and live a life of superiority. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 634. After listening, Xian Yuanyao nodded slowly. "Ajin is right. I also think that the children of poor families are more hardworking and can endure hardships than the nobles. They should be given a chance to change their fate." Instead of letting the children of the nobles live here, it is better to leave the opportunities to those who work hard and make progress. Rong Yu paused slightly, tilted his head slightly, and looked at the two people beside him casually, with a deep look in his eyes. My lord, Xian Yuanyao was puzzled, and his tone was cautious. Is the minister wrong? I thought I needed to soak a few rattan sticks for you two tonight. After the voice fell, Xian Yuanyao and Xie Jin's faces changed at the same time. You dare to sneak attack me, you are so bold. Rong Yu's voice was light, and it was impossible to tell whether he was happy or angry. It's okay to be bold, but you performed so badly. Didn't you think about the consequences before you took action? The two bowed their heads and said nothing, secretly thinking that with your terrifyingly strong strength, anyone would perform badly. As for the consequences, Xian Yuanyao said obediently, I bet the Lord is magnanimous and won't care about such things. What if I am not magnanimous? Xian Yuanyao's tone became more respectful and obedient. If the Lord wants to punish us, it is because Ajin and I are not well trained, so we dare not complain. Xie Jin nodded. Pain helps to remember. Rong Yu had a blank expression. Really? But I think the Lord should be reluctant to do it. Xie Jin continued. The Lord loves us, and the Lord and Prince Yao are deeply grateful. We can't repay them in this life, so we can only serve the Lord with our lives. Ajin Xian Yuanyao glanced at him. Don't hit me too much. Xie Jin's expression was very sincere. I'm telling the truth. Seeing the two singing the same tune, Rong Yu raised his hand and reached out to Xie Jin's collar. Xie Jin was startled and subconsciously dodged for a moment, then stood obediently under Rong Yu's indifferent eyes, not daring to dodge again. This nightgown looks good. Rong Yu pushed aside the front of his robe and saw a black outfit underneath, as expected. It looks pretty good, but it's a pity that it's useless. Xie Jin smiled awkwardly. Xian Yuanyao scratched his nose, feeling a little embarrassed. Since you still have enough brains, I'll let you go tonight. Rong Yu turned and walked towards the Dajhan Palace. If you want to challenge me, practice well on weekdays. You can also come to me for advice when you have time in the future. I will definitely let you have fun. Is this considered escaping a disaster? Xie Jin and Xian Yuanyao breathed a sigh of relief at the same time, and followed Rong Yu quietly. They thought to themselves that after trying tonight, they already knew that their master was indeed invincible, so there was no need to ask for advice often. They didn't want to be abused. But there was something that had been in my heart for a long time, and I was always nervous when I wanted to speak. Master Xie Jin mustered up his courage. Rong Yu said, it's getting late, let's all go back and rest. Xie Jin was silent for a moment. I have something I want to ask the Lord for. Rong Yu said, what is it? I like Prince Yao. Xie Jin said in one breath, I ask the Lord to agree that we can be together. As soon as these words came out, the air seemed to be quiet in an instant. Xian Yuanyao clenched his hands, holding his breath and looking at Rong Yu's tall back, his heart beating violently, extremely nervous and uneasy. What did you say? Rong Yu stopped again, turned his head and looked at Xie Jin. I remember reminding you before. Xie Jin's expression was slightly tense. He lifted his robe and knelt down directly. I know I was wrong, but I can't control my feelings for Prince Yao. What about you? Rong Yu's eyes turned slightly and fell on Xian Yuanyao's face. Are you not surprised at all by his feelings for you? More than not surprised. They have been hooking up as a couple for a long time, how could it be unexpected? Xian Yuanyao knelt beside Xie Jin, with a posture of sharing the same suffering. I also like Ajin, please help me, my lord. Rong Yu looked down at the two of them with his hands behind his back. I didn't have time to ask you the reason for the deliberate assassination and poisoning before, but now it seems that there is no need to ask, the answer is clear at a glance. Xie Jin's scalp tingled. He thought of what Rong Yu said in the imperial study before, I think you can no longer bear more charges, so other questions will be asked later. Although the 5 canes were not beaten that night, it was because Rong Yu spared him halfway, otherwise Jin would really not be able to bear more charges. After recuperating for a few days, he went to Shangning to investigate the case, and the unfinished questions have been left until now. Jin was silent for a moment. It was my selfishness that caused me to deliberately use the self-torture trick to lure Prince Yao to come here on my own initiative. I failed to distinguish between public and private affairs, which led to what happened later. I am willing to accept the punishment from my master. Even if he had to make up for all the canes he owed, he would not give up on the little leopard. Xian Yuanyao pursed his lips. Emotions are not a matter for one person. I am willing to accept the punishment. Please help me, my master. Rong Yu looked at the two of them in silence. After a moment, he said in a light tone, "Have you thought it through?" The two nodded at the same time. There are precedents in history for two men to fall in love, but there have always been constant criticisms, and it is difficult for people to look at it with a normal eye. Rong Yu said in a light tone, "Are you sure you have thought about what you will face in the future?" Jin was shocked when he heard this, and hurriedly said, "I have thought it through." Rong Yu was not worried about Jin. He frowned slightly and looked at Xian Yuanyao. "What about you?" "I have thought it through very clearly," Xian Yuanyao said. "I am not impulsive. I like to be with Jin. Even if I am criticized and look at strangely in the future, I have no regrets." Jin clenched his hands, and his heart was warm. Rong Yu said in a deep voice, "Normal couples have children to tie them up. Even if their feelings fade after years, they can still maintain their family affection. Your relationship is destined to be childless in this life. Make sure you won't regret it in the future after the freshness of youth is gone. Normal couples can also be divided into those who grow old together and those who are unfaithful." Jin lowered his eyebrows. "I believe that even if your majesty reaches middle age, or even gray hair, the master's feelings for your majesty will not fade. But some men can be romantic and have many wives and concubines when their wives are still beautiful. This is a problem of human nature, and it has nothing to do with whether there are children or not." Xian Yuanyao frowned. He actually wanted to remind Jin that he could refute if he wanted, but when giving examples, he should not forget that among the men with many wives and concubines there was his father, Prime Minister Xie. Was he even insulting his own father? The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 635. Rong Yu didn't know whether he was persuaded by Jin or whether he knew that words had no effect at this time. After a moment of silence, he said calmly, "Since it is a consensual matter, I have no interest in interfering anymore. You guys just figure it out yourself." Jin was delighted. "But don't be too happy too soon." Rong Yu's voice was calm, and he poured cold water slowly. "Only when King Huainan has passed the test can he be considered to have completed his cultivation. Now we should think about how to persuade him. If it's because of you, their private affairs have made King Huainan furious, and I will not intercede for you." After speaking, he raised his hand and waved, indicating to the two of them to go ahead and do what they should do and stop following him. Jin and Xian Yuanyao looked at each other in silence, with uncontrollable joy on their faces. "Yao Yao, I feel like I'm in a dream." Jin sighed. "I thought the Lord would not agree so easily, but I didn't expect." "Your Majesty is indeed hard-spoken and soft-hearted." Xian Yuanyao scratched the tip of his nose and his tone became much more relaxed. "I guess it is because of the influence of Her Majesty the Queen." Jin nodded. "It makes sense. Your Majesty the Queen is such a good person." Xian Yuanyao sighed deeply. "Since I had Your Majesty the Queen, your temperament has become much gentler. If Your Majesty had been with Your Majesty earlier, why would I have needed to eat so much? How much pain?" Jin glanced at him. "If the Lord had been with His Majesty back then, what would have happened to you?" "Your Majesty, I'm afraid that all my energy is focused on His Majesty. How can I have the time to deal with a young man who doesn't know the heights of the world?" Xian Yuanyao was right when he thought about it, and His Majesty was still young at that time. For a long time, one of the questions I have been most puzzled about is, who is the master of the Lord? Xian Yuanyao stood up, his brows almost knotted, although it is true that there are talents, but if there is no master, I really can't accept it, and I can't believe that your master can be so powerful just by self-study, but if you say that you learned from a hidden master. Glancing at Xiejin, Xian Yuanyao said, Jin, when I met the Lord, he was not very old. Can you imagine? A 16 or 17-year-old boy is not only extremely powerful in martial arts, but also extremely capable in military strategy. In addition to being able to make all his cavalry obedient and invincible on the battlefield, I am also top-notch in chess, mounted archery, and swordsmanship. That kind of power cannot be explained by any talent. It is like an omnipotent God. I always feel like there is a secret in the Lord. Secret. Xiejin's eyebrows deepened slightly, thinking of Her Majesty the Queen's imperial title after she ascended the throne for no reason, and concealed her inner emotions. Everyone has secrets, and some secrets we cannot pry into. Xian Yuanyao turned to look at him. Except for what you just said, the most puzzling thing about the Lord is that he gave up the great Zhou dynasty and chose to become the regent of Dongling. Xiejin's eyes fell in the direction Rong Yu left, and his voice was light. With the Lord's ability, even if he stays in the great Zhou dynasty, he can still be the lord of the great Zhou dynasty, and it is not difficult to even become the overlord of the generation. Who will be his opponent when he leads the army to conquer the world? Xian Yuanyao was thoughtful when he heard the words. But your Majesty would rather give up the great Zhou dynasty, give up the opportunity to become the overlord of the generation, and willingly support your Majesty to become the Queen of Dongling. In the eyes of the world, this is a very incredible thing. Xiejin looked at Xian Yuanyao. Can you explain the reason? Xian Yuanyao shook his head. This was something he couldn't understand before. What's even more strange is that the Lord had planned the forces in Dongling long before he met Nan 11. It seems that it wasn't entirely because of His Majesty unless he knew in advance that his wife would become the Queen of Dongling. But this is too mysterious. In short, many things cannot be explained. There are many secrets on the Lord's body, and there should be many secrets on His Majesty's body, but they are not something we can pry into at will. Xiejin put his arms around his shoulders and walked toward the palace gate. Yao Yao, the most urgent thing for us is to find a way to obtain your father's consent. Is not about insignificant things. Xian Yuanyao's expression was tangled. I have been holding this question in my heart for a long time. If the question is answered, but it will make the Lord displeased, do you think it is a good deal? Xiejin glanced at him. What secrets the Lord has nothing to do with us. After all, the Lord and His Majesty are our lords now. Prying into your Majesty's secrets without permission is disrespectful. If your Majesty is unhappy, who do you think will be the unlucky person? Xian Yuanyao was silent. Although he understood this truth, he really wanted to know who the master was. We only need to know who the Lord is right now, what our responsibilities are, and why we are loyal. Nothing else matters. Xian Yuanyao frowned and took a deep look at Xiejin. Are you not at all curious about why the Lord is so powerful? Of course Xiejin was curious. To be honest, although he doesn't think he is that powerful, compared to men of the same age, he is far stronger than others in terms of martial arts and scheming. This is one of the reasons why he can be so arrogant among the nobles of the imperial capital. 1. But he often wonders. The Lord is like an unfathomable heavenly book full of mysteries and magic. People can never see through it and find out where he is. The more so, the more people think he is unfathomable. In addition to being unfathomable, it is naturally accompanied by fear and awe. But he also knows that secrets that cannot be known to the world should always remain secrets, and it is better not to detect them unless necessary. Just think of the master as a banished immortal. That way, no matter how powerful the master is, you don't have to feel strange. Xiejin put his arm around his shoulders. It's useless to think too much about things we can't explain. You might as well think about me if you have time. Xian Yuanyao said, what do you miss? Xiejin looked at him, with a happy arc at the corner of his lips. Yao Yao, don't forget what you said before. Xian Yuanyao was silent, then frowned. What did I say? You said that if we can step out of the imperial study safely tonight, let me kiss you enough. Xiejin's voice was leisurely and full of expectations. Yao Yao is a military general who keeps his promises, so he must keep his words. Xian Yuanyao's expression was subtle. Did I say that? Yao Yao can deny it. I won't laugh at you. Xian Yuanyao pouted. Prince Ji will have to stay alone in an empty room again tonight. It has nothing to do with us if he stays alone in an empty room. I just need to make sure Yao Yao doesn't stay alone in an empty room, Xiejin said, leaning close to Xian Yuanyao's ear. His voice was low and full of temptation. Yao Yao, tonight we. As he finished speaking, Xian Yuanyao blushed. Shut up. Yao Yao is shy. Xian Yuanyao raised his hand and hit him in the face. You want to be beaten? Yao Yao can't bear to hit me. Xiejin held his fist, lowered his head and kissed him. The moonlight is beautiful tonight. Are you blind? Where does the moonlight come from tonight? Tisk, why is Yao Yao so unromantic? The two of them played all the way to Xie's house. Xiejin looked up at the sky. Well, even if there is no bright moonlight, the night is extremely beautiful tonight. It's so beautiful that it makes people excited. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 636. The night was getting darker and it was approaching Haishi, but the Dajhan palace was still brightly lit. After taking a bath, Nan 11 was leaning on the bed and playing with Hao. When she saw Rong Yu coming in, she turned her eyes and smiled. Are you done? Rong Yu walked over and kissed her forehead. Why aren't you still sleeping? Don't we wait for you? Nan 11 brought Hao over and asked him and his son to get closer together. Hao should stay in our bed to sleep tonight and let him feel his parents' love for him. As soon as he finished speaking, Hao, who was wearing a snow-white pajamas, stood up from Nan 11's arms and stretched out a pair of short arms towards Rong Yu. Father. The sound of the child's soft milk made one's heart melt. Although Rong Yu was cold-hearted, he could not be hard-hearted towards his son. He stretched out his hand to hold Hao in his arms, bowed his head and kissed her. Kiss his cute face. A mother's smile appeared on Nan 11's face. Hao is really attached to your father. I don't know why. My mother and I obviously spend more time with him. Moreover, Rong Yu always acted like a stranger, not to mention his children. The ministers were frightened when they saw him. Only Hao hugged his father every time he saw him, wishing he could stick to Rong Yu's arms. Not coming down. Rong Yu sat down on the edge of the bed and put Hao on his lap. He is still young, and he will know who is easier to get close to in the future. Nan 11 raised her eyebrows. What do you mean? What I mean is that he is ignorant now. When he grows up, he will know who is easier to get close to. Rong Yu's expression was calm, with an innocent look in his eyes. Does 11er think there is anything wrong with what I said? What's the problem? The problem is huge. Nan 11's voice became looser. I think this is the nature of father and son, just like many boys born to worship their father. Hao also has a natural admiration for you, so even if he grows up in the future, he will understand that his father is actually he is a hard-hearted person, but he still won't change the fact that he likes his father. Rong Yu hummed, that's not bad. I don't have any scruples about beating him up. Nan 11 twitched the corner of her mouth, lowered her eyes slightly, and looked at Hao who was playing with his father's hair again. She really felt that this child was a big-hearted person. Nan 11 often had the feeling that Hao seemed to understand everything. Her big, seemingly ignorant and harmless eyes were always looking at people quietly, her voice was soft, and she spoke monosyllables, sometimes making very unusual sounds. The vocabulary doesn't seem to be much different from that of ordinary children. At most, the pronunciation of words is clearer when speaking, and he is calmer than ordinary children, oh no, I should say more calm than ordinary people. He doesn't like to cry, and he doesn't like to laugh very much. Although he looks very well behaved, most of the time it makes people think that he and Rongyu are very similar, not just in appearance, but in the temperament of father and son. Combined with Rongyu's life, Nan 11 couldn't help but guess whether Hauer also had any special fate. Of course, this is just her guess. Her son will be precious no matter how you look at him. The high priest once said that Hauer is the reincarnation of the emperor star. Nan 11 frowned slightly. I think what he said should be true. Rongyu didn't care about this, whether it's true or not, he is the best choice for the emperor. Because there is no choice. Nan 11 understood what he meant, but she didn't know what to say for a moment. After a moment of silence, she shook her head and laughed. Go take a bath, the clothes are ready for you. As he said that, he took Hauer from his arms and said, go to bed early after taking a shower. You have to go to bed early tomorrow. Rongyu hummed, got up and walked to the back hall. Hauer, your father is really overbearing. Nan 11 kissed his little face lovingly, placed him beside her, and patted his shoulder, go to sleep. Hauer opened his big, dark, clear eyes and looked at her quietly. What's wrong? Nan 11 couldn't help but lowered her head and kissed his cheek again, smiling softly, are you scared by what your father said? Hauer blinked, wondering if he understood. He stretched his little arms, yawned slightly, and slowly closed his eyes. Looking at this cute appearance, Nan 11's heart was full of tenderness and affection, and she just stared at it, unable to bear to look away for a long time. Hauer is truly a little treasure given to my mother by God. Hauer closed his eyes, with delicate eyebrows, white and tender skin, and curled eyelashes, like a little fairy child left in the world. Was your father so cute when he was a child? Nan 11 looked through Hauer's little face and seemed to see what Rongyu looked like when he was a child. She felt both love and distress in her heart. Your father's temperament. I'm afraid it's not as cute as the cute one. Don't worry about it. Rongyu was obviously not as lucky as Hauer when he was young. He didn't want to enjoy the happiness of childhood. He didn't have parents who loved him wholeheartedly. He didn't have a father who loved him like a mountain and planned everything for him. He didn't have the gentle embrace of his mother, however, then again, although Nan 11 didn't know how old Rongyu was when he lost his mother, if Rongyu had memories of his past life early, then he should have an indifferent attitude towards family ties. It can even be said that Rongyu is indifferent and distant from everyone, and family affection is probably never within the scope of his concern. All his plans in life were for her. So actually you and your father are somewhat different. Nan 11 sighed, Hauer is luckier than your father. Who is lucky? Rongyu happened to hear this when he walked in, and then asked, who is 11er talking about? Nan 11 turned to look at him. His noble and handsome face under the lamplight became more and more heartwarming. She smiled lightly and said, Hauer is lucky to have such a powerful father like you. Rongyu walked over and sat down beside her, I'm lucky too. Nan 11 understood what he meant, smiled, and took the initiative to make room for him. Rongyu leaned against the head of the bed. Xiejing confessed his feelings for Xianyu Enyao tonight. Nan 11 raised an eyebrow, he really can't wait. Since I have made achievements, I feel more confident to speak up, Rongyu said calmly, although I'm not sure where they will end up, for now, there is really no reason to object. Nan 11 pondered, none of Xiejin and Xianyu Enyao are naive and ignorant of the world. They know what they want. Anyway, things have come to this point, and it's best to let nature take its course. Rongyu hummed, 11er is wise. Nan 11 tilted her head, and her crystal clear eyes fell on his face. "Ayu, you are becoming more and more humane." Well, the main text has come to an end. I seem to have said this more than once before, covering my face. In fact, the story of Yao Yao and Xiejin should be written in the extra chapter, but I'm worried that the time connection is not good, so I just let it develop naturally in the main text. You can consider the main story as finished. Next, I will wrap up the things in the palace. Yao Yao will return to Huainan. After the trip to Huainan, the main story is officially finished. I will write a sequel next. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 637. Rongyu was stunned for a moment, then twitched the corner of his mouth slightly. 11 means that I was inhumane before. It's true that there wasn't much in the past. Nan 11 leaned her head gently on his shoulder, her voice was soft. In the past, you put your whole heart on me, planned hard, for fear of running out of time, and were loyal and reliable to those around you. Most of your subordinates are also very demanding and make people too afraid of you, so everyone thinks you are like a cold-faced god, but it is obviously different now, and I am very happy to see your change. Rongyu said nothing and held her in his arms quietly. I hope that in addition to love, you can also appreciate the value of family ties. For example, Hao, this is our son, continuing our bloodline, and is our most beloved child. Nan 11's voice was gentle. There are also Xianyu and Yao and Xiejin. You can promise them and even put yourself in their shoes, which is a reflection of your tenderness as the Lord. I think Xianyu and Yao will also feel that you have changed a lot. Rongyu was silent. It doesn't matter what others think of him, but since 11 likes this, Rongyu feels that such a change is indeed quite good. It's all thanks to 11 he gently stroked her hair and whispered, without you, I would probably become a real evil god. Nan 11 chuckled, but as a king, you can't be too affectionate. You still have to master the right amount. Rongyu has become accustomed to Nan 11 always referring to him as Jun. He would correct her every time before, but now he feels that this is actually not that important. No matter what rules of honor and inferiority the emperors and empresses have to abide by in the future, it has nothing to do with them. They are husband and wife as one, and there is no need to distinguish them so clearly. What's more, this country belongs to Hao from now on, and his son is the continuation of their bloodline. No matter how the country is passed on, the relationship between him and 11 will never change. Every time he thought of this, Rongyu felt that his heart was full of heat. Nothing could make him feel more satisfied than this. Go to sleep, he said softly, I have to get up early tomorrow morning. She could have been allowed to sleep a little longer with Hao in her arms, but tomorrow morning the two meritorious officials, Xiejin and Xianyu and Yao, would be commended. Rongyu hoped that Nan 11 would be present and she would reward the meritorious officials in person. That night, a family of 3 slept in the same bed. There was no lust, only full warmth and fulfillment. Early the next morning, after Nan 11 and Rongyu got up, they put Hao, who was sleeping soundly, on the small bed in the side hall, and ordered Yinchuang and the wet nurse to take care of her. Then they changed clothes, washed up, and sat in the royal chariot to go to court together. After all the civil and military officials paid homage, Nan 11 sat on the dragon chair and spoke calmly. The cases between the Yun family and Susi have been roughly understood by all the ministers. I don't want to say more, but the heroes in this case are not. Don't mention it. After finishing his words, he calmly called his name, Xiejin, who participated in politics in the imperial study room, Xianyu and Yao, the prince of Huainan. After the words fell, the civil and military officials in the court were in an uproar. Your Majesty is here. Xiejin and Xianyu and Yao came out and knelt in the main hall. Everyone looked surprised. Obviously most people did not expect that the person who went to investigate the case was actually Xiejin. No wonder the legitimate son of the Xie family had not been seen for several months. The eyes of all the civil and military officials in the court fell on these two young men. They were indeed handsome, and good-looking. However, King Huainan was in charge of the military and Xie Xiaofu was in charge. The sons of these two people got together. Her Majesty the Queen and the Regent has no idea? Since ancient times, dynasty power has been the most sensitive. The combination of military power and dynasty power has always been a huge threat to the imperial power. Family marriages have to worry about the emperor's suspicion. These two young people have an open and honest friendship. I don't know if they have thought about the consequences. But the most important thing at the moment is not this, and the focus is not how outstanding the two people are, but the case that the legitimate son of Xie Xiaofu's family and the Prince of Huainan jointly investigated. He achieved great success by keeping silent. But they are clearly just two young guys who don't know the heights of the world. Xiejin has made great achievements this time, and he has allowed me and the regent to see his ability and courage. Nan Ziquan didn't see the different reactions of the ministers and said calmly, "Originally, I was still thinking about what to do. To reward him for his hard work and contribution, after much deliberation yesterday and detailed discussions with the regent, I decided to let Xiejin temporarily take over the Ministry of Punishment." "What?" "Your Majesty," a middle-aged minister came forward and said, "the legitimate son of the Xie family is still relatively young. Xiejin's qualifications are indeed not very high." Nan 11's eyes fell on Xiejin's face, and he has an unruly temperament and is too self-willed. When investigating Shangning's case, he did not follow the rules and broke into the Yun family's mansion directly. It is unacceptable to put yourself in danger. The minister who spoke was choked for a moment, and the civil and military officials in the court were speechless. "Her Majesty, is this a condemnation or what does it mean?" Yes, Xiejin's attitude was respectful and submissive. "I must pay attention to my words and deeds in the future. Thank you for your instruction." "My instructions probably won't have any effect on you." Nan 11's voice was calm. "We need the regent to remind you in the future. If there is any willful behavior again, and Xie Xiaofu doesn't have time to discipline him, let the regent do it for him, teach him a lesson and cure his willful problem." Xiejin responded respectfully, "Yes." The ministers looked strange. "Why do your Majesty's words sound more and more wrong the more you hear them? It's like teaching a child a lesson, verbally reprimanding, but the underlying meaning is clearly to protect his shortcomings, as if to say, my child is smart, but sometimes he is so smart that it makes people have headaches, and I can't wait to teach him a lesson." However, who would really have the heart to teach him a lesson for such a willful person who risked his own safety to investigate the case? The king would probably like such a minister who worked hard to investigate the case and put his own safety aside. Rather than saying it was a reprimand, it would be better to say that His Majesty was warning him not to take risks in the future. Moreover, since he had already entered the court, if there was any misconduct in official affairs, it would definitely not be Prime Minister Xie who would take him home and teach him a lesson. What His Majesty really wanted to say was that he would let the regent take him to his side and teach him a lesson. Of course, if you think about it more deeply, doesn't this mean that Xiejin is someone the regent values? No matter if there is anything wrong with his behavior or whether his qualifications are deep enough, as long as the regent wants to promote him, other people's opinions should be kept to themselves. As for the others, anyone with outstanding abilities, regardless of age or experience, can be promoted as an exception. Nan 11 said calmly, "If others have the ability of Xiejin, I can also promote them as an exception. If they have extraordinary talents, they can become prime ministers at the age of 18. The ministers were in awe, and they couldn't find the right words to refute for a while. As for the Prince of Huainan, Nan 11's eyes fell on Xian Yuanyao's face. Prince Yao is both the prince of the royal family and the general. There is no way to mention his status. Is there anything that Prince Yao wants? Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article feed, Placement, below article feed, target. Type, mix. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 638. Xian Yuanyao has a very upright attitude and is an absolutely loyal minister. He can be regarded as a role model for other ministers. It is my duty to share your worries with you. I have no requirements. The Lord has already agreed to everything that should be promised. He now wants power and affection. He is very satisfied and has no other requirements. My son, Yao, has no desires and demands, and is devoted to the country. I am very pleased, Nan 11 said with a lot of joy. The king of Huainan has taught his children well, and he is an example for all the Qing family. If you can teach your sons well, why worry about your family not prospering? What else can you say, ministers? Her Majesty the Queen has finished her words. The people who went to investigate the case together were obviously Xie Jin and Xian Yuanyao. However, the legitimate son of the Xie family was promoted to 3 levels in a row and directly promoted to Minister of the Ministry of Punishment, while the Prince of Huainan received no reward. This is unclear. Eccentric. Could it be that Her Majesty the Queen wanted to use Chief Xie to restrain the King of Huainan? This idea flashed through their minds, and the ministers felt that the possibility was extremely high, and then they couldn't help but wonder, could the regent want to take back the military power of King Huainan? When Prince Huainan and his son came to Beijing together, the regent kept Prince Yao behind when they left. Was this considered to be keeping a hostage under his nose? This has always been the case in officialdom. A king's inadvertent decision or sentence will trigger many thoughts, and various versions of speculation and judgment will come one after another. The more thoughtful the fox, the more thoughts he will have. Everyone thinks he is extremely smart, but when they meet an extraordinary king, their thoughts may be led away from their correct judgment. There was nothing special about this morning's court. Apart from the extraordinary promotion of Xie Jin and the verbal praise of Xian Yuanyao, it was the space for the ministers to use their imagination alone. Before the court dismissed, Her Majesty the Queen said something. The Su family was raided, and the court was in trouble. There are quite a few disciples left. Xie Jin, I will ask you to investigate whoever is bending the law for personal gain or forming a clique for personal gain. I will collect evidence and submit it to the imperial court. I want to see your ability in handling cases. Xie Jin accepted the order. I obey the order. The ministers were all shuddered, and everyone was immediately in danger. After they go back, they must destroy all evidence of their dealings with the Su family. No, not only the relationship with the Su family, but also other inappropriate cliques must be completely cut off. Be careful with your words and actions, and never let the Xie family's own son, the son of a man who has his own way, get caught. If you have something to report, if nothing happens, leave the court. Farewell to Her Majesty the Queen, and farewell to the regent. All the ministers knelt down and respectfully presented the gift. When Nan 11 and Rongyu left, everyone stood up one after another. Just like when they dealt with the Su family before, they couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Xie Xiaofu is really good at raising his children. Pei Rong, the left minister of the Ministry of Justice, walked up to Xie Xiaofu and said in a tone of admiration, if the regent can trust him wholeheartedly and promote him, the 9 sons of the Xie family will indeed live up to their reputation as heroic young men. Xie Xiaofu glanced at him, with a bit of a smile on his face. Didn't Mr. Pei listen to your Majesty? The dog is willful and needs to be polished. This meritorious service is also a fluke. Your Majesty thinks highly of it, but Jinner has nothing to do with it. You can't be arrogant, you have to work harder. After saying that, he turned to look at Xie Jin. Did Jinner hear that? Xie Jin came over and bowed slightly to his father and the adults. He was elegant and dignified, and behaved like a young master. The boy is still inexperienced. Please give me your advice in the future. Pei Rong looked at his handsome and noble features. A flash of deep thought flashed in his eyes, and then smiled. In addition to his outstanding abilities, Mr. Xie also has good looks. He can also have an advantage over others in front of the regent and Her Majesty the Queen. This is something we old guys can't compare with. Xian Yuanyao, who was standing next to Xie Jin, frowned when he heard this. His eyes fell on Pei Rong's face, and he secretly asked what did this mean? Are you saying that Jin is favored by her looks? Master Pei, thank you. Xie Jin heard the meaning of his words, but was not angry. He said with a smile, I heard that Master Pei had a good relationship with Prince Wei in the past, and King Wei also promised to let Master Pei sit on the throne of minister in the future. Sir, Master Pei waited for so long but got the better of me. I feel really bad about this. Pei Rong's face suddenly changed, and his smile froze. Thank you, Mr. Xie. By the way, Mr. Pei and I will be colleagues in the Ministry of Justice from now on. Please cooperate with Mr. Pei on official matters. Xie Jin's smile was perfect and impeccable. After all, the regent seems to think highly of me. If I feel dissatisfied, I can't help but want to complain to His Majesty. If His Majesty asks about it, I will naturally not dare to hide it. Mr. Pei should understand. Yes, I can understand, of course I can understand. Pei Rong's smile became stiffer and stiffer, and after speaking, he handed over to Chief Xie. I have something to do, so I'll take the first step. Xie Xiaofu nodded. Xie Jin stood in front of the palace steps, watching his fleeing figure, with a slight curve in his mouth. In the future, I will have to deal with these people who are decades older than me. Thinking about it, I feel, it should be very challenging. Xie Xiaofu glanced at him, be careful and don't be too arrogant. Don't worry, Dad. Xie Jin smiled, my son knows what he is doing. The ministers walked away one after another. Xie Jin glanced at Xian Yuanyao, and his eyes quickly fell on Xie Xiaofu. Dad. What? I have something to report to you formally. Seeing his serious attitude, Xian Yuanyao's heart skipped a beat and he turned his head to look at the sky uncomfortably. Xie Xiaofu asked, what's the matter? Dad, do you want some tea now? Xie Xiaofu frowned, drinking tea. Xie Jin pulled Xian Yuanyao over and said, Yao Yao would like to serve you tea. Xian Yuanyao's face flushed, and he was nervous. He didn't dare to look at Xie Xiaofu's face. Oh, Xie Xiaofu understood, looked around, and confirmed that there was no ear on the other side of the wall. Then he said lightly, have you met with the king of Huainan? Xie Jin shook his head, not yet, I plan to choose a suitable time to go with Yao Yao. Then let's wait until we meet the king of Huainan. Xie Xiaofu said, I have no problem, but before obtaining the consent of the king of Huainan, I dare not drink the tea offered by Yao Shizi. What if the king of Huainan comes to fight with me? Xian Yuanyao pursed his lips when he heard this. That's fine. Xie Jin nodded slowly. Anyway, I'm just officially reporting to my father that my relationship with Yao Yao has been confirmed. You can treat him as a future daughter-in-law or son-in-law. We can both. Xian Yuanyao frowned and muttered in a low voice, what do you mean by both? Obviously you are the daughter-in-law. Hearing this, Xie Xiaofu couldn't help but look at him deeply. A meaningful smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and he turned and left leisurely. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbspeed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 639. The weather has officially entered the hot summer. Xian Yuanyao returned to the military camp. After Rong Yu tacitly approved of his relationship with Xie Jin, the two agreed that they should perform well and concentrate on their work. First, Siejin should gain a firm foothold in the court. He should not neglect his duties due to personal feelings, otherwise he would fail the favor and respect of the master. Siejin began to investigate the case, focusing on the Ministry of Personnel and the Ministry of Revenue. Siejin was a new noble in the court, a newborn calf. The ministers did not need to take him seriously. They could trip him up or make things difficult for him. After all, they had been in the court for many years, and their power was not something that a young boy could easily pry open. However, the difficulty now was that Siejin was a fearless calf. The ninth master of the Xie family was never a law-abiding person. His style of doing things was unpredictable. Under his sloppy appearance, he hid a meticulous mind and great courage, as well as ruthless means that were almost as good as those of the regent. As cunning as a fox, as cruel as a jackal. He would dig deep into the ground to collect the evidence he wanted from the people he targeted. In addition, he had a father who was the prime minister, and two more powerful backers, the regent and his majesty. No matter what he did, the regent and prime minister Xie would back him up. No matter how powerful the court officials were, could they be more powerful than the regent and prime minister Xie? Who dared to compete with the regent and the prime minister? No one dared. Especially the regent, who had become a ruthless character that everyone in the court was afraid of. How long had the new emperor been on the throne? The Prince of Wei's mansion was exiled in his hands, the Su family was confiscated and beheaded in his hands, the Yun family was annihilated, and the noble guards were punished last night. This series of things was enough to prove that the regent was cold and ruthless and did not look at anyone's face. Anyone who fell into his hands could only pray for God's mercy. Therefore, Siejin's investigation went smoothly. The court officials dared to quietly destroy the evidence, dared to cautiously cut off some contacts, dared to lose some interests like self-castration, but they resolutely did not dare to create any obstacles for the ninth master of the Xie family. In early July, Pei Rong, the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, was impeached for taking human lives lightly. Several young skeletons were salvaged from the dry well in the backyard of his house. After the coroner's autopsy, it was confirmed that they were all young female corpses. Pei Rong and his son were taken to the Ministry of Justice for interrogation, and then they confessed that these were all beautiful maids of the Pei family. In the past, when the Prince of Wei's mansion was prominent, in order to please the Prince Xianyuan, the father and son of the Pei family would often hold banquets at home to invite Xianyuan to come to the house. During the banquet, several beautiful maids were prepared to serve. After a feast, the maids were taken to the backyard to rest. Xianyuan was cruel. The maids he had played with to death were directly thrown into the well. Sometimes the young master of the Pei family would play with Xianyuan. In short, there were quite a lot of dirty things involved. Since he was trying to please someone, he naturally had to get corresponding benefits. Xianyuan used his position as the crown prince to provide the Pei family with a lot of conveniences. Pei Rong's son and nephew, and even Mrs. Pei's nephew from her mother's family, were all uneducated and unskilled. Xianyuan arranged them in the Ministry of Personnel or the Dali Temple. Although they all started from the bottom, they were promoted quickly in the later period because they had someone to support them. For a straw bag who could not read a few words, such behavior was enough to make all scholars despise him. The Pei family was quickly uprooted, which was also a justice for those innocent women who were killed. After Siejin investigated the case, he said sincerely, "God has eyes, it's a pity that Xianyuan is weak. If he was a healthy person, I'm afraid that the women in the Dongling imperial city would not be enough for him to harm." When he said this, Nan 11 was also there, and he just frowned when he heard it. Everyone says that he is weak, but the crimes he committed prove that he is a strong enough person. The ancients said that nothing is difficult in the world, as long as you are determined. A weak body could not stop the cruelty in his bones. If this strong willpower was used in the emperor's world, I'm afraid that the entire dongling would be buried in his hands. Xiejin deeply agreed with this statement. This conversation was just an episode. After the episode, Xiejin continued to devote himself to serving his master. The Ministry of Personnel and the Ministry of Revenue are the most powerful and profitable departments among the 6 ministries. The Ministry of Personnel is in charge of the promotion, demotion, rewards and punishment of officials in the court, and there are many acts of buying and selling officials in disguise. The Ministry of Revenue is in charge of the national treasury, taxes, land, money, and salaries. Su Ce was able to use his power to accumulate a large amount of wealth for the Yun family far away in Shangning. It is conceivable that there are many profitable ones. How many of the remaining ministers in the Ministry of Revenue are clean? Xiejin acted vigorously and found out several serious behaviors. Within 2 months, the entire Ministry of Personnel and the Ministry of Revenue were in panic. Basically, all those who should be offended were offended, and those who should be purged were basically purged. During this period, there were desperate officials who spared no effort to hire assassins to assassinate him. It is not worth mentioning. After all, the 9th master of the Xie family had no chance to fight back in front of the regent. It was not so easy for others to get the upper hand from him, not to mention that he was surrounded by expert guards who rarely appeared all year round. The result of hiring a killer to kill someone is that the assassin is caught, his jaw is cut off, and he is taken to jail for interrogation. Then the mastermind behind the scenes is found out, and the crime is compounded. He turned a blind eye to some small fish and shrimps under the 2 ministries. After all, he still understood the principle that there are no fish in clear water. Few officials in the court can be truly honest and upright, and have no desires or demands. Saints will not enter the officialdom. But he was so unscrupulous that he used the officialdom as a springboard for making money, so careless about human life that he didn't care about other people's lives, and was so fat that he was embezzling himself. He was mediocre and incompetent, and greedy. If such a termite is not removed, will it harm the people? Throughout the summer, from June to July to August, the memorials on the imperial desk piled up like a mountain, most of which were impeachment memorials. Some were impeachments by Xiejin against ministers who had violated the law, together with solid evidence. Some were impeachments by the censors against Xiejin for acting recklessly by relying on his power, which made the whole court panic. There were also several memorials written by Xiejin at the behest of Xian Yuanchen, paving a thorny road for this cautious young man to enter the Ministry of Personnel. The road is in front of us, and the thorns are also there. Only those who dare to step over the thorns can see the smooth and bright road ahead. In addition to Xian Yuanchen, the young students who stood out in the palace examination last year also got the opportunity to be reused in this purge. Some were purged and some were promoted. The Ministry of Personnel and the Ministry of Revenue were completely replaced, and so was the court. Xian Yuanchen was arranged by the regent to work in the Ministry of Personnel at this time, and became a doctor in the Ministry of Personnel. The other 4 people in charge were also young students who had been trained in the Ministry of Personnel for a year, and it was time for them to repay the emperor's grace with passion. Author's words. I will update 1 chapter today, so that I can sort out my thoughts and finish the main text first. It will take about 2 to 3 days to finish the plot of the main text, and then start the extra chapter of the trip to Huainan. Because Yao Yao and Xiejin's plots have been written a lot, the extra chapters belonging to them may not be too long. Next is Chu Nanyi, and then the prince's development record. I am not sure if there are other extra chapters. Although I want to write, I need ideas. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 640. September 20th was the 40th birthday of the king of Huainan. Xian Yuanyao requested to return to Huainan to celebrate his father's birthday and bring Xiejian, who was eager to meet his parents-in-law, with him. The queen and the regent allowed him to do so. So at the end of August, the two officially set out on the road to meet their parents-in-law. At the same time, more than 3 months had passed since the deadline given by the regent. The 8th Battalion of the Imperial Army, led by Zhang Rui as 1,000 households, and the 7th Battalion of Xiaoqi had a real contest on the parade ground. This matter has to start with the conflict 3 months ago. The sons of the gentry who were born and raised in the imperial capital have always had some prejudice against the poor. This prejudice is almost innate, with a sense of superiority, and the difference in the treatment of the poor who need to be selected and trained before they can be enlisted in the imperial army, while the gentry can directly go through the back door, which also leads to the gentry's perception that they are superior. However, this perception was soon broken by the regent, and the superiority of the nobles suffered a severe blow. Those who provoked and offended Chu Hongii in front of all the imperial guards 3 months ago had been expelled from the army and expelled from the imperial guards under the heavy punishment of 30 military sticks. The thunder-like treatment of the regent frightened the remaining nobles. Although the 3-month deadline was short, Xiaoqi still took the nobles to practice at the risk of his life, knowing that it was impossible to defeat the well-trained imperial guards from the poor families. Needless to say, it was hard work. Some people who really couldn't bear the hardship took off their military uniforms and chose to give up one after another, leaving the imperial guards. Giving up by yourself is better than being expelled after losing the competition, so you don't have to suffer for 3 more months in vain. So when the 3 months were up, only 118 people were left from the original 200 people. The 8 battalions under Zhang Rui had a total of 120 people. The number of people was evenly matched, and 2 more or less would not have much impact. However, for the sake of fairness, Zhang Rui casually asked 2 people to rest aside, without taking any advantage. 118 against 118. The competition items were not difficult: horse stance, running circles, single combat, and archery. For the sons of the nobles who had hardly suffered from training, the more difficult competition items were obviously not suitable for them. At present, as long as they were physically strong, could persist in running 100 laps around the training ground, the posture and persistence time of horse stance could meet the standard, and the single combat could show obvious progress, and the archery was significantly improved compared to 3 months ago, and they could hit the center of the target when shooting, then their attitude would be considered passed. As for winning, you don't need to compete to know that it is impossible. Want to win someone who has been training continuously for several years in 3 months? Even if you don't eat or drink, and train day and night, it is impossible to do it. On the day of the competition between the 2 camps, Rong Yu personally went to the scene to supervise for a moment, and Chu Hongii was responsible for presiding over the competition rules. The Imperial Guards of Xiaoqi's 1st Battalion were much darker than they were 3 months ago. It was obvious that this was the result of training under the sun in the summer. Although they were a little darker, they were much more energetic and no longer had the arrogance they had before. The 2 battalions competed with each other, and the battle was quite big. It probably took a whole day. Rong Yu watched outside the training ground for half an hour and then left. He knew the result without watching any more. Back at Dajhan Palace, Nan 11 was sitting on a low couch by the window and teaching her to read. When a person is born, his nature is good, natures are close, but habits make them different. The soft and sticky voice made people feel soft-hearted. Hao, who was 1 year and 6 months old, was more articulate and spoke clearly and fluently. He was obviously smarter and more intelligent than other children of his age. He had not started to recite the 3-character classic yet, but was just reading it for the time being. Nan 11 would teach him a few sentences when he was free, back and forth, until he was familiar with those sentences. Nan 11 has always advocated gentle education and did not want to kill the child's childishness early, so she would read with Hauer in her spare time. If he read well, she would kiss him twice, and if he read poorly, she would teach him twice more. Even if she was teaching, she would definitely do it in a relaxed way that the child could accept. Rong Yu stood at the door of the palace and watched for a moment, with a slight smile on his lips. He quickly walked to the imperial desk in the palace and sat down, and began to review today's memorials. The child's childish voice and the mother's gentle voice in front of the window echoed in my ears continuously, as if they had become the most beautiful and wonderful scenery of the summer. I don't know how long it took, but the voices of the mother and son gradually became smaller until they were completely quiet. Rong Yu turned his head and looked through the hollow rosewood partition. He saw Nan 11 holding the already asleep Hauer and walked to the bedside, put the child on the bed, bent down and gently patted the child's shoulders to make him sleep more soundly. Her peaceful and gentle appearance looked like an ordinary mother, exuding the glory of maternal love all over her body. Rong Yu used to think that the best way for two people to love each other was to grow old together. Now he found that loving a couple and having children is also an incomparable happiness. As he was thinking this, a familiar breath appeared around him. Nan 11 sat down beside the imperial desk, raised his hands and rolled up his sleeves, and asked him carefully, "How was the competition in the training ground?" "The guards from the poor families have received many years of formal training. They are strong and flexible. It is no problem for them to deal with the guards from the noble families," Rong Yu said leisurely, "so there is nothing to see, but the guards from the noble families who stayed behind have been serious in the past 3 months. It can be seen that they have worked hard." Nan 11 said, "In fact, whether it is a poor family or a noble family, there are people who are not worth cultivating, and there are people who can endure hardships. Not all poor families can become talents, and not all noble families are fools." Rong Yu was silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. 11er is right. Emperors of different dynasties have different habits of doing things, and the results they have caused are different. Nan 11 thought for a while. The children of the gentry have good backgrounds, and most of them live a life of luxury. The children who don't like to study aim to join the imperial army, as if their future in life is settled. Not only will they have a good life, but they will also have a lot of salary. In addition, the emperors and dignitaries of all dynasties have favored the gentry. What reason do the gentry have to suffer with the children of poor families?" Rong Yu hummed, agreeing with her. "Some of the children of the noble families can endure hardships, but after entering the imperial guards, they found that all the children of the noble families were the same. After a long time, it became a matter of course to go with the flow. And the children of the poor families were sent to the palace at a young age because of their poor family background. They knew that only by working hard and enduring hardships could they survive and have a chance to change their fate, so they could only grit their teeth and persevere. However, not all children of the poor families have precious qualities. People's desires will change with time and environment, so it is important to restrain and constrain each other." Although Rong Yu didn't talk much, he liked to listen to Nan 11 talk very much. Every word he said was like a gentle spring breeze blowing through his heart, making people feel comfortable all over. He wanted her to say more, and more. So at this time, he put down the red pen and listened attentively.